Hey guys, it's me, Soso. Lately, I've felt uninspired and out of ideas since I finished animating the video for my music. Even though it's a relatively simple video, drawing was still exhausting. The best way to combat art block is to find an old artwork I don't love and redraw it. Unfortunately, I have yet to share many pieces for various reasons, so I had a gallery to choose from. After some searching, I found this drawing called Snake Girl. I analyzed the drawing to see what I liked and didn't like from it. I loved the eye shape and the colors in her hair. However, her fingers should be more inward, and her mesh top doesn't make sense. Based on reference photos, her top should be under the mesh for more comfort. Also, her chest was disproportional, and a gray shirt provided zero support. Finally, she looks slightly off balance in an unintentional way. I decided to keep all these details in mind when I redrew her. So, first things first, I pulled up some reference images in Krita. Tutorial time with Soso. Yeah. I clicked on the reference image tool on the left side to do this. If you don't have the toolbox, click on Settings, go down to Dockers, and check the box for Toolbox. While you're there, ensure that the Docker for Tool Options is also selected. Once you have the toolbox, click on the pin icon. If unsure, you can hover your mouse over the pin to confirm it's called the Reference Images tool. Then click on Tool Options and click on the plus. It will pull up your files. All you have to do is select the reference image, click Open, and you're done. Optional, you can click on Tool Options and change the opacity and saturation of an image. Now, you can move around the reference images freely without worrying about it. For example, if you want to adjust the size or location of a reference image, click on the reference image tool and click on the image to change. My screen recorder malfunctioned when I drew this, so I downloaded a new one. I drew for about an hour before I decided to take a break, except when I went to save, it would only let me keep 1 minute of the footage unless I paid for the premium service. The worst part is that they advertise the screen recorder as a free, no watermark recorder. As you can imagine, I was very upset about this, so I switched back to my malfunctioning screen recorder. After fiddling with some of the controls and my laptop settings, I fixed it again and returned to recording. Sadly, a sizable chunk of my sketching process is lost. In the previous piece, it looked like she was in a fight and pulling out her secret weapon, so I wanted it to look like that. I experimented with different poses, which is not in here because of the screen recorder, and ended up with her on her knees, looking up at the camera as if to quiet the viewer. I want to take a moment to appreciate her shoes here. You don't see it in the final piece because I wanted to keep the purple smoke in the original and completely forgot that the shoes would be covered. I don't think you guys understand the pain and suffering I went through when I had to cover up her shoes when I added the smoke. If you look at her outfit, you'll notice that the shoes aren't the only change to the artwork. Instead of her odd strapless tank top from the first piece, I gave her a tube top underneath her mesh shirt. It's way more comfortable and practical for her. I also gave her a sword to suggest that she drop her sword to draw her opponent closer to her. I first drew the front view of the sword based on reference images and used the perspective tool to place it on the ground. From there, I made another layer and redrew the sword to better fit the perspective. Her hair is also significantly shorter since I figured it would get in her way if I made it any longer. From there, I colored and shaded her. I absolutely loved the way her hair subtly fades from green to purple. It was a unique look, so I kept it. I also emphasized her red eyes and the click of the pen. I started adding the smoke and realized that the scene felt incomplete. I just remembered that I needed to add the opponent, so I quickly painted a silhouette that would fit the composition. I didn't make it very detailed because I assumed that the smoke would obscure most details. It did not. I also added some lighting since this might be like a holy person coming to crucify the snake girl, who I assume is a demon. The golden light represents how the person is the quote-unquote hero, and she's the demon. Overall, I love the way I drew her, but I don't like her opponent. Because I wasn't satisfied with the art, I redrew my 2023 redraw. I wanted a more detailed background this time. In my head, I wanted them to be in a church with some obscure smoke, and she's kneeling in front of whoever the opponent is just before she strikes. This time, this person was going to be praying. I went online and I found a 3D model of the interior of an old church. It was perfect. I took a screenshot and added it as a reference for my art. I painted the background in black and white. It's not very detailed here because I was blocking out where I wanted everything. My older sister later pointed out that I added no religious markings, like a cross. I then started adding more defined shapes and finally decided to add line art. Except, I hated it. A lot. I decided to take a step back and give myself time away. When I came back, I realized how wonky the art was. So I decided to go on YouTube and watch artists whose backgrounds I love. Then I came back and decided to restart. Again. This time, I drew thumbnail sketches of what I wanted before jumping straight into the illustration. I decided on the last thumbnail because it kept the background and energy I wanted without being too flashy. I really want to draw the first thumbnail though, since it seems like an intriguing composition. Here, my friends, is where I discovered it. Krita's perspective tool. I don't know why it took me this long to find it, and I'm slightly annoyed with myself for not having seen it sooner. It had different options to change the opacity and color of the grid lines, and you can change the type of perspective grid you want. It has fisheye lens. I don't think you guys understand how life-changing this is. I've spent so much time drawing my perspective grids by hand, only to discover that Krita has a perspective tool. And it's not like this tool is new either. I recognize this icon. It's been here for as long as I can remember. I remember this icon from the first version of Krita I downloaded. And nobody bothered to mention it. So here I am, happily informing you of this beautiful tool. Obviously I used it. Probably not correctly, but I used it to sketch out general shapes. I decided not to beat myself up for the backgrounds looking blurry. The focal point of this artwork is the snake girl, not the pillars. I gave myself a little leeway as well with the smoke. I painted the background in a brown monochrome for this new artwork, then blended in some purples and blues to give it more variety. I also added hints of yellow for highlights. After stepping back, I realized that the shadows cast by the columns looked off, so I adjusted them to look more realistic. Another change I made was adding some more detail to the opponent. I purposely made the opponent look like the opposite of the snake girl. She's wearing darker, more form-fitting clothes, a small weapon, and very long hair, so I gave the opponent almost white, baggy clothes, a giant sword, and short, spiky hair. The lighter clothes were meant to show that the opponent is also a holy person. Initially, I wanted the opponent to have their back to the snake girl because I wanted her to have the element of surprise. However, I changed my mind and had the opponent look right at her. I wanted it to look like they were equals. I added some extra lighting on the opponent and some line art, but I remembered not to fuss too much since I would add Gaussian blur. I purposely drew this image to turn it into a phone and computer wallpapers, so you'll see most of the details in the center. I decided to give the girl a snake for some final touches since there's too much empty space. I also changed her necklace to gold because I like gold. I duplicated all the background layers, merged them, and added a lens filter blur. I did the same for the opponent, but instead used Gaussian blur. Here are the final pieces and the little background sketch I did in between. Honestly, I enjoyed making these, but it took so incredibly long. I'm glad I learned about the perspective tool and could create artwork I was satisfied with. I just realized that I've been referring to them as Snake Girl and Opponent. I don't even know the opponent's gender. So, what should I name them? I can't keep referring to them as Snake Girl and Opponent. I'm gonna lose my mind. That's all, guys. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more upcoming videos. Soso out!